I was born with a debt of 700,000 euros because my grandmother decided to set up our entire family. Most people inherit money, a house, maybe a piece of jewelry from their grandparents. I inherited 700,000 euros in debt. It started before I was even born. My grandmother, Anneliese, was the type of person who could talk her way into, and out of, anything. She was charming, ruthless, and completely reckless with money. She convinced everyone in our family, my parents, my aunts, my uncles, even distant relatives, to invest in a business idea she had. Something big. Something that would make us rich forever. Except it was all a lie. By the time I was born, the business had collapsed, and my entire family was drowning in loans, unpaid taxes, and legal trouble. My grandmother? She disappeared. And the debt? It didn't just vanish. It landed on us. I didn't have a normal childhood. While other kids had birthday parties and new clothes, I had bill collectors and eviction notices. My dad worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. My mom had to sell family heirlooms to cover loan payments. My uncle, who had put his entire life savings into my grandmother's scam, left the country just to escape the debt. And the worst part? We weren't even allowed to talk about it. Whenever I asked about my grandmother, my parents would just go silent. If I pushed, my mom would get teary-eyed, and my dad would just walk away. All I knew was that she had ruined us. And we were still paying for her crimes. It wasn't until I turned 18 that I finally got the full story. I applied for a student loan, hoping to go to university, but my application was denied. I was confused. I had never taken out a loan before. That's when my dad sat me down and finally told me everything. The 700,000 euro debt wasn't just my parents' problem. It was a family debt, and since I was part of the family, my name had been dragged into it from birth. I had bad credit before I even had a bank account. I couldn't get a loan. I couldn't finance a car. I couldn't even rent an apartment. Because legally, I was in debt before I could even walk. And my grandmother? She was still missing. I couldn't accept it. If my family was still suffering, she had to be out there somewhere. So I started digging. I tracked old records. I checked every bank statement, every property she had ever owned. I even found an old business partner of hers, someone she had scammed years before us. And then, I found something. A small house in Spain, registered under a different name. But the birth date? It matched hers exactly. She had reinvented herself. While we were scraping by, she was living under a fake identity in a sunny coastal town. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I booked a one-way ticket and showed up at her house. When she opened the door, she recognized me immediately. For a moment, she looked happy to see me. Then, she saw the look on my face. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just asked. Why? She sighed, leaned against the doorframe, and just said, "It was never supposed to be your problem." That was it. No apology. No remorse. She thought she had done what she had to do. I realized then and there, she was never going to fix this. So I did the only thing I could. I turned around, pulled out my phone, and called the police. My grandmother was arrested for fraud, but that didn't erase the debt. We were still responsible. But I wasn't letting her win. I took every piece of information I had, found every legal loophole possible, and started fighting. It took years, but I finally freed myself from the debt. As for my grandmother, she died in prison. And you know what? She didn't leave me a damn thing.
I found a notebook full of my name in my roommate's closet. I never meant to snoop through my roommate's stuff. I had been living with Evan for about a year. We weren't best friends, but we got along. Split the rent, took turns buying groceries, and had the occasional beer together. He was quiet, a little weird, but nothing that set off major red flags. Then one day, I was searching for my lost hoodie. I had seen Evan wearing it the week before, and I figured he had thrown it in his closet by accident. I opened the closet door expecting a mess of clothes. Instead, I found a small black notebook sitting on top of a locked box. Curious, I picked it up and flipped it open. My name was written on every single page. Not once. Not twice. Hundreds of times. First, I thought maybe it was a joke. Maybe he had been practicing my name for some weird reason, trying to forge my signature? Messing around? But the more I flipped through, the worse it got. My name wasn't just written randomly. It was written in different sizes, different handwriting styles, sometimes violently scratched into the paper over and over. Then, on the last few pages, I found something even worse. Sentences. I wonder what he looks like when he sleeps. He doesn't lock his door at night. He won't know until it's too late. I slammed the notebook shut, my hands shaking. This wasn't just some weird habit. Evan had been watching me. I tried to act normal when Evan got home that night. I sat on the couch, forcing myself to play video games, pretending like I hadn't just found something terrifying in his closet. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Then something else hit me. If he had a notebook like that, what else was he hiding? My hands felt clammy as I scanned the room. Then I noticed it. A small blinking red light in the corner of the bookshelf, barely noticeable. I stood up, pretending to stretch, and casually walked closer. It was a camera, pointed directly at my room. I felt sick. Evan had been recording me, watching me, probably for months. I had two choices: run or confront him. I chose the second. That night, while he was in the kitchen, I grabbed the notebook and the camera and threw them on the table in front of him. His face stayed blank. He didn't deny anything. Instead, he just smiled. Evan calmly leaned back in his chair, staring at me. Then he said the words that still haunt me. "I just like knowing you're real." I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had packed my bags. I didn't tell him I was leaving. I just walked out and never looked back. I don't know where he is now. But sometimes when I check my phone at night, I see an unknown number texting my name over and over again. And I wonder if he ever really stopped watching me.
My brother's girlfriend had a baby. And I think it's mine. The first time I saw the baby, something didn't feel right. My brother, Ethan, had been dating Jess for about a year. Their relationship was always a little rocky, but when she announced she was pregnant, he stepped up. He got a better job, started saving money, even talked about proposing. When the baby was born, I went to the hospital to meet my new niece or nephew. The second I saw the baby, my stomach dropped. He looked exactly like me. Not just a family resemblance. Exactly. Same nose, same eyes, even the little birthmark on his shoulder, the same one I had. I tried to shake it off. We were brothers. Of course there'd be similarities. But Jess wouldn't look me in the eye. And suddenly, I knew. This wasn't just my brother's kid. This might be mine. A few months before Jess got pregnant, something happened that I swore I'd take to the grave. One night, Ethan and I had a fight. It was stupid, just brother stuff, but it got heated. Jess and I ended up outside, both of us frustrated, drinking, venting. One thing led to another. We slept together. It was a mistake, a huge mistake, and we both agreed to pretend it never happened. I told myself it was a one-time thing. That it didn't mean anything. But now, looking at the baby in Ethan's arms, I wasn't so sure anymore. The more time I spent around the baby, the harder it was to ignore. Ethan was obsessed with being a good dad, but I could see it in Jess's face whenever I held the baby. She was nervous. One night, at a family gathering, my mom even joked, "He looks more like you than Ethan." Everyone laughed. Except me and Jess. I needed to know the truth. I couldn't live with the what-ifs anymore. I needed proof. I bought a secret paternity test. All I needed was a swab from the baby and one from me. Getting mine was easy. Getting the baby's? A nightmare. One day, while Ethan and Jess were out, I offered to watch the baby. When no one was looking, I swiped a sample. Then, I sent it off and waited. I spent 2 weeks feeling like I was going to puke. Then the results came in. And when I opened them, I felt my heart stop. The test was positive. I was the baby's father. I sat there, staring at the paper, trying to process what this meant. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. This was real. Now, I had two choices. Tell Ethan the truth and destroy his entire life. Stay silent and live with this secret forever. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. I took a DNA test for fun. And found out I was kidnapped as a baby. It started as a stupid impulse buy. I had seen an ad for one of those home DNA kits, the kind that tells you where your ancestors came from, what percent Neanderthal you are, and if you're predisposed to getting dementia at 50. It was on sale, and I figured, why not? My parents had always been vague about our heritage. Mom said we were Irish. Dad insisted we were mostly German. It seemed harmless to check. So, I spit into a tube, sent it off, and forgot about it. A month later, I got an email, "Your results are ready." Excited, I clicked the link. And then, everything fell apart. The first thing that jumped out? I had no matches to anyone in my family. No parents. No cousins. No distant relatives. Nothing. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe my parents had never taken a test. Maybe our family history was just a little more complicated than I thought. But then, under close relatives, a name popped up. A woman I had never heard of. Listed as mother. Confused, I clicked on her profile. Her name was Julia Becker. And next to her name, in bold red letters, it said, "Looking for lost daughter. Missing since 1997. I sat there for what felt like an hour, my heart pounding. There was a message option. I didn't want to click it. I didn't want this to be real. But I did. The first message in the chat? "If you are seeing this, please contact me. I have been searching for you your whole life." I couldn't breathe. I checked my birth certificate, my baby photos, my parents' old albums. Everything looked normal. But the DNA results weren't lying. So I sent a message back. "I think there's been a mistake." Less than 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A phone number. A request for a call. And I had a feeling that once I answered, my life would never be the same. I took a deep breath and called. The woman on the other end picked up immediately. She was crying before she even spoke. She told me she had a daughter, a baby girl named Lily, who was kidnapped from her crib in 1997. They had searched for years, hired private investigators, begged the police for help. But no trace of Lily was ever found. And now, she was on the phone with me. I told her that wasn't possible. I had a family. I had parents. But she asked one simple question. "Have you ever seen a picture of your mom pregnant with you?" I stopped. I had seen baby pictures. I had seen photos of me as a newborn in my mom's arms. But I had never seen a single pregnancy photo. Not one. I barely remember the drive to my parents' house. I walked in, shaking, holding my phone with the DNA results pulled up. I didn't even say hello. I just asked, "Am I adopted?" Mom went pale. Dad looked at the floor. Neither of them answered. I pressed harder, voice rising, demanding to know the truth. Then, finally, my mother whispered, "We didn't adopt you." Her voice cracked as she said it. "We saved you." I felt sick. My stomach twisted. They weren't my parents. They had stolen me. They had taken me from my real family and raised me as their own. And suddenly, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Julia, my real mother, wanted to meet me. The people who raised me, the only parents I had ever known, begged me not to go. I had a choice. Stay with the family that kidnapped me and raised me as their own. Meet the woman who never stopped searching for me. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. I went to a swinger party, and ended up sleeping with a woman while her husband watched. The invitation came unexpectedly. A coworker, Jake, mentioned that he and his wife hosted private events at their house. He handed over a black envelope with only an address and a time. No details, no explanation, just an understanding that anyone who showed up knew exactly what they were walking into. Curiosity got the best of me. The idea seemed foreign, almost unreal, but something about it pulled me in. With nothing better to do that weekend, I decided to go. The house was massive, modern, and extravagant, sitting at the edge of a gated community. Inside, the atmosphere felt like an exclusive club, dimly lit with a soft pulse of music running through the air. Guests moved around with an effortless confidence, women in elegant dresses, men in fitted suits, conversations flowing like something unsaid was hanging in the air. Jake spotted me across the room, acknowledging my presence with a subtle nod. That's when I noticed her. Victoria. She stood out immediately. Everything about her, from the way she carried herself to the way she scanned the room, commanded attention. Her emerald green eyes settled on me, and she smiled. Beside her stood her husband, Daniel. He was older, dressed sharply, sipping whiskey as he watched her. The way he observed her movements, the way he didn't interfere, gave the impression that this was routine. Victoria's attention never wavered. Victoria approached with a slow confidence, her presence demanding focus. Every movement was deliberate, every glance calculated. She touched my arm lightly, trailing her fingers down in a way that made it clear she was testing my reaction. There was no hesitation in her actions. She enjoyed control, and she took it without asking. I felt my pulse quicken as the weight of the situation settled in. Daniel remained still, watching from a distance, his expression unreadable. His silence wasn't one of disapproval, but one of quiet amusement. He was giving permission without saying a word. The invitation was unspoken but understood. Victoria wanted me to follow. And I did. The bedroom was exactly what I expected, minimal, sophisticated, and designed for indulgence. The air smelled of expensive perfume, the sheets smooth against the skin. Victoria took control immediately, pushing me back onto the bed. She was relentless, intentional with every move, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Her dominance was intoxicating. The door opened behind us. Daniel had entered. He stood at a distance, watching without speaking. There was no jealousy, no resentment, just an unshaken satisfaction in witnessing his wife in control. His presence should have made me uncomfortable, but instead, it heightened everything. Victoria never hesitated. Her enjoyment came from being seen, from knowing exactly what was happening and how much power she held over the moment. I had never experienced anything like it. The night unfolded in a way that felt surreal. The intensity of Victoria's presence, the weight of Daniel's gaze, it was all-consuming. There was no rush, no awkwardness, just an experience unfolding exactly as they intended. Afterward, Victoria collapsed onto the bed, her breath still unsteady. Daniel moved closer, taking in the aftermath with the same quiet interest he had maintained all night. He didn't react with words, only a smirk and a slow sip of whiskey. The offer to return wasn't stated outright, but it was there. The understanding that this wasn't a one-time thing, that an entirely different world had been open to me. I left that night knowing something had changed. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to walk away from it.